Okay, everybody. Well, welcome again to another episode of Compliance in Motion. You know, the podcast where we do a deep dive into the stories of safety professionals coast to coast. And today we are not falling short on that because we've got a guy who's got extensive experience in the world of safety, building safety cultures and beyond. As a safety professional, podcaster, producer, host, author. We've got Blaine Hoffmann today. Blaine, welcome so much to the Compliance in Motion podcast.
Oh, yeah. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been looking forward to this for some time. So thank you for having me.
Excellent. So here we are, folks. Listen in, get your notepads ready. And today's theme is going to be the bigger picture. You know, how do you relate some of the topics of what's going on today into your world and use them to guide your vision and some of your objectives for your safety culture? But before we dive right into that, let's talk a little bit about Blaine and his background. So you began your career as a firefighter and later transitioned to an occupational safety and health professional, eventually launching, Safety Pro podcast. I think it was back in 2014, you said, right about then. What
Yeah.
drove you to make that pivot and really go from firefighting into a safety professional career?
Well, I wanted to be a firefighter for a long time and went into that somewhat with a little bit of, naivety. And don't know what I was actually expecting. But I got to say, it wasn't fun. I mean, I really loved it. But there was a lot of waiting around for stuff to happen. And so for me, I was always interested in what can we do? What else can we do? What are we going to do today? And, I was sort of that little gnat that was flying around the firehouse, always looking for something to do. The compliance team, those folks were always running around, driving around, going into businesses, doing inspections, doing meetings with businesses, things like that. So prevention and education was where I wanted to head in that direction
Hmm.
there. So um, there was an unfortunate accident involving some officers and some firefighters when I was on a leave of absence, and I was getting some additional training at the Ohio State Fire Academy for arson and arson investigation. And there was a program called Juvenile Fire Setters back then about that type of topic. And that accident resulted, unfortunately, in a couple of fatalities on an accident scene. And it was, the engine that I usually ran off of, and that you know didn't really set well with the wife, and we had a long conversation about it, and I decided to leave and go into the private sector. And there was a program down at Sinclair College called Safety Risk Management, and lo and behold, half of the courses were fire science technology, and
Yeah.
I got done quick and went on to get my bachelor's and master's and never looked back. I really enjoy this profession. Decided to start the podcast in 2014, right around the time I decided that I was going to go back into the corporate sector, corporate world, and stop doing consulting. I had worked in various industries and professions, from mining, surface mining, manufacturing, construction, and I started a consulting business. Did that for about a decade, and
Hmm.
traveling got to be a bit much with young kids, so I decided I was going to go back to working full time. And that, I think it was an itch I still had to be able to just do what we're doing, talk to other safety professionals. I didn't realize how much I would miss that, going into different
Hmm.
workplaces and talking
Hmm.
to other safety managers and just noodling through problems and figuring out, through bouncing ideas off of each other, what else we could try. And so the podcast really served that purpose for me, and I've been doing it ever since, and I love it.
Great. I mean, it's obvious that you love it. Your podcasts are just fantastic. This is kind of
Oh,
an
thanks.
interesting dynamic for today to have two podcast people interviewing on the same thing. But it's really kind of a opportunity for me because I've always followed your organization and you've got some excellent topics out there. But in addition
Thank
to
you.
the podcast, I understand that you're still kind of out there working in the field and doing some safety professional field work as well. Is that still the case?
Yes, I still work full time as a safety professional and have been. And again, and I tell every safety professional that asks or talks to me about, they feel like they're stuck in their career or they love the company, they love the work, but they just don't feel challenged. And I always say, just be active in your industry. You can work for the same company for 20 years if it's the right fit for you and the work is challenging. And if you're active in the safety community, whether that is listening to podcasts like this one or going to ASSP meetings or the NSC conference, or you have to always have a foot outside of your organization. Not only do you benefit professionally from seeing what others are doing and what they're thinking, but your organization benefits as well because you get to bring some of that energy back into the organization.
Absolutely.
And
Right.
we often like to hedgehog. We get inside a company and we just get our head down and we work. Next thing you know, 10, 15 years goes by and we had no idea that our own industry was passing us by.
There's like a popular phrase that is something like working in the business versus on the business.
Yeah.
It's like you're working in safety. Those are the tactical things that you have to do every day to keep people safe on the job, injury free. But then you got to step back every once in a while and work on the business. And that's really where you should be connecting with your peers at
Yep.
the safety professional conferences and networking events and things like that. So to that end, though, when people reach out to you and listen to your podcast, do you think of one standout moment, from a listener's response? It was kind of something that like really convinced you that like, my podcast is that place where people can branch out and start working on safety versus in safety day to day.
Yeah. So and you know this, podcasting is a marathon. It's not a sprint. If you want to look at podcasting as a way to like reach people, some companies want to reach potential customers, some want to um, do other things with the podcast. Everyone has a motivation with their podcast. I learned that it's a marathon. So early on, it was I felt like I was just talking into a microphone to nobody. It's a weird feeling. I never did interviews with my podcast. It was always just me breaking down a topic, speaking to other safety pros like me. So when I started getting LinkedIn messages and emails of, hey, I heard this topic. Have you ever dealt with this other, like, I'm having a problem? So I would have listeners actually give me topics to
Oh,
do other
yeah.
episodes. And then it kind of snowballed from there. I started talking to other safety professionals on the podcast, and the technology's gotten so much better than
Hmm.
recording a Skype, if you remember
Yeah,
Skype.
right. Yeah.
Um, it was terrible
Yeah.
and the audio was terrible, but it's so much nicer now. And so I started interviewing other safety professionals, having conversations about topics, and and companies would call me and say, "Hey, we had listeners reach out and schedule training because they heard us talk about how important training is, not selling training, but just talking about like things we're talking about." So that was really when I kind of realized, this isn't entertainment. We're actually, and I never wanted it to be. I wanted to provide information that people can use. And
Hmm.
so that's how I view safety podcasts. I
Yeah.
I don't really want to listen to some safety people tell jokes and kind of just hang out.
Right.
There's a bunch of podcasts for that. I
Right.
wanted mine to be, this is actionable information you can use right now. Like,
Yep.
this is you listen to us break down this topic and learn in real time. I wanted them to feel like they are in the room, kind of just listening to this conversation and taking something away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right, and because sometimes that network is hard to find, and it's hard to find the time to go to that network and participate in it, and, you're spot on with the advancements in technology. We're all taking advantage of everything out there whenever we can, but now it's super easy for us to record a podcast and make it audio only or visual or whatever you wanna do. People can listen to it while they drive.
Yeah.
But we're the same way. We wanna make sure that people understand who they're listening to and what their backgrounds are, but we really want them to walk away with some trigger in their head. Something resonates with them that they can place, um, on their to-do list and start an action plan against it. So thinking about that a little bit, let's talk a little bit about your book. I understand. I think you've written two books: "Rethinking Safety Culture" and "Rethinking Safety Communications." And in
Yeah.
both of those, you kind of challenge the narratives of traditional communications and traditional culture. Can you share with us a little bit, around communication strategy that you've seen a shift in behavior and where it's particularly effective?
Yeah. So when it comes to communication, I'm speaking specifically about our profession as safety professionals, how we approach communication inside the business.
Okay.
We've often, and it kind of speaks to culture as well. They're two related topics. One more high level communication, definitely more of a tool, but we often sell ourselves short. One, we don't know how to communicate effectively sometimes. And I remember going to safety school, safety college, and, it wasn't really discussed. And I learned this through my adventure in podcasting.
Mm,
It's not the field of dreams, right? I'm dating myself with the Field of Dreams reference, but if you build it, they will come. No, they won't. You got to tell them that it's there. And
right.
so how do I do that? Well, where are your folks likely to be hanging out? And how can
Mm,
you reach them there? They're on social media. Okay. Maybe they're on LinkedIn. Maybe you build an email list. So it's a lot of marketing and type of stuff that goes behind that. Well, in the workplace, when we want to communicate about safety, how do we typically do it? We send an email along with the 400 other emails a day that come out, depending upon the size of your organization.
mhm.
Maybe we do a weekly safety roundup, where we have all the stuff you need to know about safety is in a weekly sort of a distilled newsletter type of thing that goes out. Well, what's the open rate? What's the read rate? Do we use Slack in the organization or Teams or chat? Do we also have a strategy to disseminate that information via those channels? So, what I got to was we need a strategy, a communication strategy, much like the PR team has and the marketing team has. So, go talk to those folks if you're lucky enough to have one
Excellent
of those
idea.
teams. Yeah, find out what help they can give the safety team in terms of how we effectively communicate what's important to know about safety inside the organization. And then you have to define your audiences. You have to segment your audience, your C-suite, your executives, your corporate folks.
Right,
You're going to
right.
talk to them entirely different and focus on different aspects of safety than you
Yep,
would, frontline supervisors, managers, or even the workers. You might be saying the same talking about the same thing, like an event that occurred, but you're gonna be saying very different things to those different audiences. So we have to get really good at a communication strategy. So we need to rethink how we communicate safety, and also learn psychology behind
yep,
communications. The way we talk about it and what we choose to what words we choose are important. So I think that sort of led me to, all right, let me write some of this stuff down. Let's talk to some people and get some ideas.
mhm.
And like I covered prospect theory. These psychologists did a study with $100 bill, and they noted that people have a stronger emotional response to losing $100 than they do to finding $100. So sometimes we could use that to our advantage and talk about what we could stand to lose if we don't do this thing a certain way, or
Oh,
when we talk
yeah.
about safety. So we got to be careful, we got to balance it, but like nobody taught me any of that stuff. I had to go
Right.
learn it.
Well,
So,
literally, I talk to safety professionals all across the country, of all different types all the time. And you just said something that I thought, listeners, jot this down, put it on your action item list to do. We struggle with messaging around safety, engaging audiences, keeping their attention. And then Blaine, appropriately pointed out that sometimes the message needs to be shaped differently, whether you're talking to leadership or you're talking to mid-level managers or you're talking to somebody who is a technician who drives the truck to a site every day and you hardly ever see them. And Blaine also mentioned, PR. Well, not every company has PR, but almost every company has a marketing team. Your marketing team people, they know how to talk to different audiences, or at least they're supposed to. So go in and meet with them someday and say, look, I've been using this same messaging for years. I'd like to mix it up to make it more effective and put it in places where I know our employees are going to see it and engage with it. Your marketing team is getting paid to figure out how to engage with customers all the time. They know the psychology behind this stuff. So
yep.
take a step back instead of working tactically in safety and go up and on safety and schedule yourself a meeting with that marketing team and see what kind of brainstorming you can do to reshape your message and your channels. That's basically, something that people can do this week if they have the time to get to it, right?
Absolutely. And I definitely cover another aspect you touched on, being able to say different things. It's about there's a whole section in the book called about scaling. And so well, framing and scaling are two things. Scaling, and I learned this from a captain, a fire captain, a training captain. And she taught me when I was going through training with her on how to be an instructor, a fire instructor. She said, you've got to be able to say the same thing 3 or 4 different ways. You could take any topic, and we do this in safety if you think about it. Take any topic, you could have a full day or several day course on it, like confined space entry or something, right? And then
Right.
you could also have like a half day type of refresher on that.
Hmm.
But then you could also have break it down into a toolbox talk before a crew is about to start their work, a 10-minute, hey, remember these 4
Yep.
things you have to do. And but it's all the same topic. You're all talking about how to safely enter in a confined space and conduct your work. You've got to be able to scale that
Hmm.
based on the context of in which you're talking about, and then the audience that you're talking about as well. If we can learn to do that, I anybody could call me up and say, or Tony, you call Tony and say, "Hey, Tony, we got a situation out here at this department or at this job site involving this topic. Could you come out and help?" You're prepared. You're prepared because you know the content, you know the
Hmm.
topic, and you're like, "Okay, who are we going to be talking to? Oh, it's a work crew. They're about to start work, and okay, so." I know exactly how I'm going to say this thing I got to say to that audience to get them to do the thing we think we want them to do, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, so scaling, framing, we have to get good at all that stuff. And none of that's
Absolutely.
really like a how to. You have to learn it. And so go talk to those people as you indicated. They're going to help you.
Yep, and we're always preaching to our customers about best practices about microburst training and refresher training, and Blaine just kind
Right.
of walked us through that. We have these event-based training programs, and it's like go get your PowerPoint, the one that you've been using for years, bring the
Yeah.
people in the room, do 30 minutes of training, 10 minutes of testing, a little bit of dialogue, and you send them out to the job. Well, I guarantee you, in today's modern learning world, these people are daydreaming after the first 5 minutes. They're thinking about how much work they have to get done before they go home, their kid's soccer game, who's picking who up later after band practice and all that kind of stuff. And the rate
Yeah.
of forgetfulness is just a constant battle for safety professionals as they're doing their training. So you have to learn how to mix your message up, obviously staying within the core lessons that you have to, share with people to keep them safe on the job. But then think about these opportunities where you can drop nuggets of refreshers. You probably all have heard um, uh, a phrase around, like you're going through the woods and there's no trail there, and you get lost in the woods. But the more you do that trail back and forth, you start to make a path. And sooner or later, there's a path between point A and point B, and you get there just like that. Your brain's no different. If you give people the opportunity to learn it, refresh it, learn it, refresh it, keep them going down that path more times a day or week or month, whatever your frequency and cadence needs to be for those refreshers, then it's gonna become a habit versus a once and done kind of a thing. Now, this kind of rolls right into something else that you've talked about. And for listeners, if this is something that you're interested in, I believe it's episode 192, where Blaine talks to his guest about the imposter syndrome in safety
Oh,
professionals.
oh
And
yeah.
so this is, I'm going to let Blaine talk about this rather than me just take it and run with it. But I think it has a little bit to do with the fact that, we're trying to train people to get them the right skills. And sometimes people don't just feel, they kind of undercut themselves, right? Or they kind of don't feel like well, I'll let you go ahead and talk about so give us some thoughts as to, the challenge that this persists in our field around imposter syndrome and how leaders should really target and overcome it.
Yeah, and I think we've all faced this at some point in our career. I know even as podcasters, I'm constantly questioning, what am I doing here? And and should I be here? Look, it's imposter syndrome is what it's referred to nowadays. I don't know that it had a label, 20 or 25 years ago.
Oh, it was
When
there, but it may not have had a label yet, right?
Yeah, the feeling was always there. Self-doubt, questioning our abilities, asking whether or not we belong, we should be in this room with these folks. And so Mark Alicia, who you're referring to that
Yeah.
I talked to, that this conversation kind of came out of an earlier episode years ago that I did with an Army Ranger named Chris Peranto. His name is Tonto, and you might recall his name. He was one of the survivors of the Benghazi CIA compound attack in Libya, and they made the movie 13 Hours, was what it was called, and I talked to him. He's the one that taught me this phrase that confidence comes from competence. And it's in the Ranger Way, his book, that I read, which led me to have a conversation with him. So we started talking about this imposter syndrome, and I mentioned this whole concept of, sometimes when we're questioning whether or not we're smart enough or good enough, or have I been doing this long enough, sometimes, not always, but sometimes the key is making sure that we understand the topic or the subject matter. Just know it. You have to know it, because if you know that, then you get that out of the way, your self-doubt and your that confidence might be coming from somewhere else. Not
Mm,
that I don't fully understand this aspect of safety management in the case that we're talking about. So Mark and I have had numerous conversations offline. I've worked with him in the past, and we had these discussions, and he was always deeply involved in development of other safety professionals within the organization. Even as a safety manager himself, he always volunteered to present at during onboarding for new safety hires and things like that. So our conversation came from a place of deep understanding and experience, but also what we've learned along the way. Things like, if you're doubting whether or not you're smart enough, make sure you focus first on understanding the topic. Be able
mm,
to speak confidently about that topic because you're competent in that domain. And if you could
Hmm.
focus on that, it kind of distracts you from the, wow, I'm speaking in front of a group of people. No, you're speaking about a thing that you know.
Good point. Yeah.
That's
Right.
that start there and see if you can build that confidence.
Right. Absolutely. And, as safety professionals in your company, listeners, you're out there every day standing up in front of a group of people. And some of our safety professionals are of a younger generation, and they're talking to people that have been on the job for 20, 30 years. And they may have just graduated from the program and had 2 years of safety, mentoring and training under the belt. And now you've got to go out there and do this toolbox talk to a group of people that have been doing this every day. So you've got to know your subject and feel like you know your subject in and out, but then go back to maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes ago in this podcast and remember what we talked about. Reach out to your community. So you
Yeah.
don't have to do all your practicing in front of the employees that you need to mentor on a toolbox talk. Go find your group and practice in front of the group where the stakes are a little bit lower and build your confidence as well. So know your topic. You're talking about something that you know inside and out, and of course you might have that little intimidation because these guys or gals that are standing in front of you are your seniors, and you're the new guy and they're waiting to razz you a little bit or something like that. um, but if you get some practice through your community of safety professionals, then you're going to walk back in front of that group and have that confidence that you need to not only deliver the message, but to know how to listen so that you can see what the audience get the audience dynamics of and try to incorporate that into your style and adjusting because you really are accountable to engage that group so that they hear what you have to say to stay safe on the job. Now,
Yeah.
switching gears a little bit as we go into some evolving perspectives on things like OSHA and other
Mm.
things that are happening these days. But before we get to OSHA and stuff like that, I want to ask you a question about something that I think is a staple in our safety professional community. And you did an episode around this. I think it was episode 189. There's no such thing as a root cause. And it was a root cause analysis and the evolving perspectives that you talked about and the evolution of RCA. I think it was in episode 190 or something like that. How do you reconcile these opposing views for people? And what's your current perspective on, root cause analysis?
Yeah, my friends at Taproot, I talk to them a lot about this particular topic. It's been a passion of mine for many years,
Hmm.
incident analysis, and why businesses still to this day continue to fail on finding out what is going wrong and causing harm to our employees, right? As a safety professional, if we're not able to find and fix the systemic causes of these problems, then we're not doing our job. So
Hmm.
I always talk about this topic. The no such thing as a root cause is a trend that has been around. It's been cyclical, right? It's cycles over the years, and it popped back up on LinkedIn with some, like, what do you call them? Thought leaders, I
Yeah,
think,
right.
and gurus
Yeah,
of it's just their little way of saying, well, technically there's no such thing as a root cause because there are many contributing fact and it's like, which are root causes. Yeah. So they're just trying to be cute and maybe separate themselves. It's that whole marketing thing.
right.
Um, and so what the problem with that though is especially for non-safety individuals, business managers, business leaders, is they hear something like that, don't fully take the time to fully understand what they're actually saying, what they mean by that. And they'll go off and go, technically there's no such thing as a root cause from some gurus I saw online. um, not saying that's dangerous, but that it can be misleading. And
Hmm.
so I always reached out to the folks at Taproot and talk to them about this and say, break this down. What does that mean and what does it not mean? And so that was an interesting topic. And the history of RCA, we talked about how we started with root cause analysis through like the Industrial Revolution. I mean,
Hmm.
I know Alex from Taproot went way back into like ancient Greece. and talked about there's evidence of these um, this sort of journey to finding out what causes problems. And I think in we're always evolving, of course, but in 2025, at the time of this recording, we have a pretty good idea of the need to have a formal process in place that's repeatable so that
Hmm.
we don't miss opportunities. So the biggest challenge for me, and this is just me, my opinion, is um, there are there are companies out there that can help you do this, but at the end of the day, if you have nothing, you're going to get terrible results. You're going to have
Right.
repeat incidents. You're not going to experience operational learning. You're not going to engage workers that do the job and try to find out from them what trips them up or what's frustrating about tasks that they tend to maybe modify or skip. We would call that deviate, right?
Hmm.
Somebody skipping a step or deviating on its surface sounds like, if you would have just followed the process, this wouldn't have happened. So you're the problem. We're going to try to fix you, right? Fix
Right.
people.
Right.
Maybe, but you stopped too soon. Why is there frustration in the process? And Alex loves to use the phrase, is it easy to do right, hard to do wrong?
Mm.
And is there something we can do with the process which is systemic, which is operational, which is the business?
Hmm.
Can we modify the process or make it easier to do right? Reduce the number of process steps or thinking tasks that are involved, and just all of those things we miss when we stop at the worker. Not saying the worker's never a problem,
Right.
but if we go the other route and verify and demonstrate our work, document our diligence, and get to, okay, this was a one-off type of, Blaine did something that Blaine wasn't supposed to do. We talked to other folks. We went through the whole process to arrive here honestly. The risk of going that route is pretty low,
Hmm.
meaning we've just validated our processes and talked to other workers to get to this. If we go the other way, which is stop at Blaine being kind of a knucklehead and skipping a step, the risk is greater that we miss an opportunity to improve our processes, right?
Hmm.
So it's about changing our mindset. And that's why I'm always talking about that topic on the podcast,
Yeah.
because it's so important to what we do as safety professionals. And it feeds into oftentimes how we've communicated the proper way to do this thing or
Mm.
trained and developed and retrained. The myth that we just tell somebody once at 5 years ago when they onboarded,
And they're
and
gonna
we've not
remember.
changed a
Yeah.
thing since then,
Yeah.
and we've not done refreshers.
Right.
Come on. Like, we've
Things
gotta be
change.
better at
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
yeah,
the environment and the machines and the workers or the people they're working with, they've all changed over 5 years. So
yeah,
there's got to have been new variables introduced into the situation that need to be paid attention to. And I would
exactly.
imagine this kind of rolls right into some of your work that you've done you've helped, like, I think about uh, more than a dozen different companies achieve OSHA VPP star
Yeah,
status. And for those of you who don't know exactly what VPP stands for, it's OSHA's Voluntary Protection Program, VPP. And they have a level called star level, which is awarded to work sites with exemplary safety. And Blaine has really helped dozens of companies achieve these levels and get to that star level. And I would imagine that you're working with people to change their thought process on root cause analysis and establish new benchmarks so that they can get to these exemplary levels that not everybody achieves, right? Um,
absolutely. The last, I would say 8 years or so that I was doing consulting, it was exclusively with companies trying to partner with OSHA and submit their application to the VPP. And it was so satisfying, but you're correct. The technical stuff is easy, and this is just, again, my opinion, but, we see it in play. A rule, once you know the rule, you know it. The trick is what does that look like for us within our operations, in our building, with our
Mhm.
workforce, with our tools and materials and our resources or lack thereof? What it's the how that folks get tripped up on. That you have this standard you have to meet, that's not going to change. Once you know that, it then you have to shift to how can we achieve that standard in our way. So it's a lot of this stuff is performance driven, right?
Mhm.
And so with VPP, no two sites, even within the same organization, no two sites had the same exact approach because of the different labor markets, different regional differences in the region. Their volume and materials that they use were slightly different in each of the operations. So it was an exciting challenge for me. But you're absolutely right. It starts with this outlook, this
Mhm.
operating philosophy of, why are we trying to do this? What are
Mhm.
we going to get out of this?
Mhm.
Um, but with tying it back to seeing, like, approaching root cause analysis instead of seeking to find blame or fault, it was about how can we learn about our operations and where can we adjust our operations to make things easier to do right, to reduce risk, to eliminate stuff altogether that
Mhm.
we probably don't even need to do. Um, to make that shift, there are some other consequences that come along with it, and I did a presentation at the Department of Labor years
Mhm.
ago, with OSHA, the head of OSHA and, their staff, and some, the board of, VPP, PA, Voluntary Protection Program Participants Association, was there. And we called it the VPP spike. A lot of companies that started down this path to partner with OSHA, they improved employee relations and this effort around we want to know what's causing you issues so that we can fix them before
Mhm.
they bite you, right?
Mhm.
They saw this spike of first aids, near misses, all these incidents getting reported, and they would freak out. So we called it the
Yeah.
VPP spike. And I would tell them they were always happening. They were just afraid for one reason or another to report them.
Right. Yep.
Or they just figured nothing would get done. It was a minor thing. I technically didn't get hurt, so, I just don't report it. No malice. It's just there's no focus put on it by the
Right.
company. Now
Right.
leadership is coming around saying, "Hey, I wanna know what is stopping you from being successful." And in this case, we're talking about the context of safety. What's stopping you from doing your job? What trips you up? What gives you trouble on this machine that we can help with? Now people go, "Oh, they want to listen to us." And so they saw this spike, so a lot of companies would freak out, and I'm like, "No,
Right.
that's a good sign." They were happening, but they were underground. And
Yeah.
so that mindset, changing that mindset and approaching it that way with improved communications, training and development, and this battle rhythm, right? This rhythm of constantly touching base and reinforcing that with the workforce. That's culture.
Yeah.
That builds culture,
Yep.
and that's a good thing. So
It is a good thing, and you talked about that spike, and you're pointing out the fact it's not like this stuff was never happening. It's just that now it's coming to the surface.
right.
And the one of the worst things in safety is the stuff that you don't hear about because those are the time bombs ticking out there that are eventually going to hurt somebody and ultimately could cost, tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars to the company's bottom line.
When it's
So,
quiet, I
yeah,
worry. And
when
if
it's
you've had toddlers in
yeah, the
whenever it's
situation,
quiet,
right? Yeah.
yeah,
Right, right.
yeah,
So, obviously very much a OSHA voluntary program and, people get in there. And
yeah.
of late, obviously in the news, there's been all kinds of discussion about OSHA and could it be abolished? Attorney Philip Russell is, there's things going on there. And, I guess my question to you would be like, what were your most eye-opening insights from this kind of conversation? I know for me, you know, of course, they're not talking about getting rid of safety in the workplace, which is like the pendulum swinging all the way to the other area. But I would like to think, and of course, as safety professionals, you and I would like to think that no matter what regulatory group is watching, our companies are good corporate citizens and good corporate social people, that they don't want to put people in a job environment where they're going to get hurt. So whether there's somebody watching your every move, these are things you should be doing anyhow to keep your company and your people, safe. What are your thoughts around this whole OSHA discussion, around the abolishment of OSHA, and this debate that's going on?
Man, that I've got so many thoughts on this, and you're talking about Philip Russell, the
Yeah.
attorney that I talk to often on the podcast. So my thought, just my thought, I can go either direction, and it's still not going to matter. Federal OSHA, one, workplace safety standards, workplace safety isn't going to go away. Abolishing OSHA, they call it the NOSHA Act. It was one congressperson, and they didn't even have any co-signers. So it was one, and they were really just making a statement about
Mm.
bloated government budgets and things like that.
Right.
So here's how I break it down. Half of the states in the United States, half of the states don't have federal OSHA running and overseeing workplace safety for private and public employers in those states. It's somewhat of a mix. Some states have their own private employer, um, s- kind of oversight, but I'm sorry, public employees like police, fire, the schools, public schools, they kind of manage their own safety. But when it comes to the public sector, um, businesses in general, it's federal OSHA. And then
Hmm.
other states they run the whole thing. They don't have federal OSHA. They don't have federal OSHA employees, offices. So all
Right.
that budget, all that cost doesn't exist. The states do that. As a matter of fact, federal OSHA, the Department of Labor, will fund up to 50% of the state's efforts to self manage. There's an incentive, whether people realize it or not. I call it an incentive. There's an incentive for a state to run and manage their own to the same target, right? The
Hmm.
state
Hmm.
can adopt some differing rules. Maybe their state has some different industries that are very specialized that they have some additional rules. They work with the Department of Labor to get those policies approved, those standards approved.
Hmm.
But there's a process. So if half the states already do this,
Great.
and get some funding from federal OSHA, and federal OSHA doesn't have to staff with full benefits, pay,
Oh,
and
right.
offices and things like that, then I I don't see particular problem with the other remaining states say, "Hey, we could do that."
Hmm.
You're still trying to hit the same target, right? The
Right.
same standard. So some might argue, yeah, but states might do it differently and they might try to cheat or get it. And it's like, well, but I mean, to what extent? And is that enough to warrant just a full federal takeover of workplace safety in each state? Um, I don't know. I don't
Right.
know the answer to that. But, on the other side, what if there was a full federal, like, okay, that's it, we're gonna do it across all the United States, and we're gonna staff federal compliance officers. I don't see that happening either. The budget that they would need for that,
Huge.
vis-a-vis
Right.
taxes.
Yeah.
I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
um, look, I think you're right. Where we are in society today, I don't think we could just go, you know, full no standards because society will control and govern through protest and
Oh,
just
right.
not shopping at companies. That
Oh,
that
and
can't happen.
we're seeing it today all the
Yeah.
time with workers.
Yeah.
Your safety record at a company is
Yeah.
going to attract the most talented people, because
Yes.
no one wants to go to, you might be the best and the brightest. Why would you choose to go somewhere that they have no stated safety direction that measures up to what your expectations are? So it's
Yeah.
self-policing. And in this day and age, especially in the trades, manufacturing, construction, HVAC, roofing, all of these things, there's a labor shortage. and we're not finding enough good people, and turnover's high typically. So you have to not only offer competitive pay and a community of people to associate with at your company, but you also have these other things that are attractive to that top skilled labor force, and that
And
is
if
your
yeah,
your safety
and if you
record. So it
can
doesn't matter who's regulating you, you have to
oh,
do it
yeah.
anyhow, right?
If you can rethink safety as an employee benefit, think about how that changes your approach within an organization. If you're a C-suite executive listening, or even an HR manager or director, if you start looking at workplace safety and health at your company
Hmm.
like an employee benefit. Think about the investment you'll make and rethinking the budget. What does that mean? Training and development,
Right.
reduced attrition. They stay longer. We have fewer stops in work. We control cost on that side. So the financial folks, yeah, I think it's one of the biggest employee benefits we could offer.
Yep.
You got health insurance and stuff like that, time off, but
Yeah. Put it as a
ensuring that
line in your
you're not gonna
hiring,
get hurt?
in your
Yeah.
candidate interviewing packet, put it as a line item. Talk to people about it. Make
Yes.
sure that you communicate it and demonstrate. Don't just give it lip service, but talk to people about the nuts and bolts of it, just like you do your benefits program. So as
Right.
we transition here into the end of our podcast time together, I have one thing. I'm thinking this is still the case, but you please validate it for me. Your daughter's pursuing a degree in occupational safety
Yes.
and health. Yeah. So there you go. Passing the torch
It was a
uh,
shock to me.
yeah, there you
It
go.
was.
Yeah.
Um, yes, she changed her major and decided she wanted to go into workplace safety and health. She's just finishing up some, fire prevention, classes right now. So we talk a lot about like, "Hey, what are you learning? What are you not learning?"
Sure.
And all that. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's not
exciting.
often that you have a built-in resource to go to. We talked about reaching out to your community. Well, the daughter
Yeah.
was at the dinner table. Hey, Dad, what's this? Right? But to that extent, a younger person getting into the field of safety, if you were mentoring one aspiring up and coming safety leader right now, as we wrap up today, what message would you leave them with as the most important thing to think about going forward in their career in safety?
Oh, great question. I actually had a mentee call yesterday with somebody, a new mentee, and
Hmm.
this came up. So I had two things. One, high level, know yourself. Take time to get to know who you are as not just a person, but a professional. Like what kind of manager or what kind of worker do you want to become? What do you like? What do you not like? What do you respond to? What kind of culture, what kind of environment do you like to be in? Because that's going to drive a lot of your, we call it happiness in the
Hmm.
workplace. You'll
Hmm.
know real quick you're in the wrong organization or the wrong role or something like that. And that right there, even if you know everything, the technical stuff, it's not going to matter if you cannot um, succeed
Hmm.
in executing on those things because
Right.
you're in the wrong culture or the wrong environment. You're in the wrong role. Um, so know thyself, right? And then the other piece is yes, we talked about it earlier. So it's fitting that we come full circle. Confidence comes from competence. You have
Hmm.
to be competent in what you're doing. You're in the right spot. You got the right company. You're in for this time in your career anyway, right? You're in the right position. You have the right opportunities, but yet you don't really know how to teach somebody how to conduct an effective deep dive of an incident, right? You don't know have a
Hmm.
process. You don't know how to write a policy document. You don't know how to. So you've got to get that stuff down as well. So
Hmm.
those two things coming together, that you're a serious threat.
There you
You're
go.
gonna do some good stuff if you're
Yeah.
in the right position, in the right organization, and you have the competence to lead confidently. Those 2 things, work on those 2 things.
That is going to just help you excel in your career as a safety professional without a doubt. Well,
Yep.
that's it for today, Blaine. I mean, thank you so much. I know we covered a lot of ground, but I hope our
Yeah.
listeners today are walking away with a handful of things that they can put on their to-do list to start thinking about with their team and their organization back in their companies. And everybody remember today's guest, Blaine Hoffmann. He's got a fantastic podcast out there, a series of podcasts, and hundreds of them to listen to. Check him out, as well as the Ving podcast with Compliance in Motion. We really enjoy having you as listeners today. So if you had something, you're walking away and this was well worth your time, please subscribe so that you're not left, so you're included in the future podcast announcements. Leave a review, share with your friends. Remember how important that community is of safety professionals. Make them aware of both Blaine's podcast and ours so that they have an additional resource that they can tap into. Again, Blaine Hoffmann, thank you so much for your time today. We'll look forward to catching up with you in the future.
Thanks, Tony. I appreciate it.